couple ago. So that was them ferrying casualties across to New Jersey on the other side.
I spoke to some police officers that I know, police officers who used to work for me in the police department, who were at the scene, who gave the most incredible descriptions. First of all, police headquarters has been evacuated. There's a tiny skeleton crew there. It's considered a possible secondary target. They've moved police operations to another location, which we've been asked not to disclose, so that that doesn't become a possible target. The police commissioner is there now trying to get together enough information with the mayor and his people to actually brief us. Police precincts, and this is something eerie, Peter. We've touched on this before about a city, an American city in a free country going into lockdown. The 75 police precincts in New York have been sealed off in a one-block radius to traffic and pedestrians.
All of which, I have to tell you, is alarming, but seems common sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, on a day like today, when nothing seems normal, such incredible things actually seem prudent. One of the officers I spoke to on the telephone, who was there when the first building collapsed, said he was standing across the street. He was assigned to find a senior FBI official to get a briefing for the top command, and that the building fell. He said, I ducked behind a truck, and I closed my eyes and hit the deck. He said, I waited 30 seconds thinking that was enough. Then I opened my eyes, and it was night. It was complete blackness. He said, I began to crawl, and crawl for more than a block. And then I picked myself up off the street, but I still couldn't see. He said, a kid who was outside the major dust actually saw him struggling for sight, went in there and pulled him out and brought him into the church at Barclay Street, where he washed his eyes out with holy water to try and regain his vision. He was covered with dust and soot. These are the kind of human descriptions of the stories of people who were there at Ground Zero when the first building fell. Pressing for some kind of numbers, they said, all we have is preliminaries, and they're too small. He said, the Port Authority believes they may have between 10 and 20 cops involved in the building, in the rescues, that are unaccounted for. The fire department, and this may be a lowball number also, between 80 and 100 firefighters.
An earlier report said there were 200 firefighters unaccounted for.
Unaccounted for at this time, and between 12 and 20 New York City police officers. Again, soft numbers, but unfortunately, the estimates are that rather than going down, they may go up. That's the fear.
This is the occasion, not one of those occasions. This is the occasion when a member of the police department, the fire department, or the military has got to respond only to the training. You just go into automatic and you do what you're trained to do.
It was amazing to me listening to the police radio traffic today, even as momentous disasters unfolded. I mean, the unspeakable. The collapsing of the Twin Towers, one after another, that while there was a high pitch to a lot of the voices and a little screaming and yelling, the rapidity with which calm was restored on the radio, and they went back to sending orders and continuing operations and acting in a logical manner, you really do revert to your training as a second nature.
As you look at this and you listen to John Miller, and I thank you, John, for that. No one is better plugged into the police and firefighting apparatus in New York City than John Miller. He not only been a reporter for most of his adult life, but he worked for the police department in New York for a while before he had the good sense to come back to journalism, and he is totally plugged in. But even and when he talks about soft numbers here, it's because as you look at this disaster scene, that's a live picture. That is a live picture. 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 4.5 hours after this actually occurred, and you're looking at the smoke and the dust still emerging from the edges of these canyons in lower Manhattan, and the magnitude of trying to deal with these people, extends to moving them across the Hudson River in ferry boats, the ubiquitous ferry boat in New York harbors, not as necessary as they were in the days of greater ship travel, to the New Jersey side. And the Canadian television network, one of our partner television networks in Canada, is now reporting that American burn victims from here, I'm not sure whether it's the Pentagon or here, but I suspect it's from here, being transported as far away as Canada to Canadian hospitals there. And there you get some sense of how difficult it is to get a real grasp of how enormous this is, other than to say, as the mayor of New York and the governor of New York State both said to us a short while ago, I just don't want to touch the casualty figures as of now. Pierre Thomas, who's been with us for much of the morning, also reports from the FBI. And we may never know much more about one of the aircraft than this, that at least one of the planes this morning, we haven't got no more details on that, was able to communicate that it had been hijacked. In some cockpits, in some of the aircraft now being in use commercial service, there's a button you can hit that sends a code to your headquarters that says you've been hijacked, so you don't have to try to tell the hijacker that you're actually talking to headquarters. But that's as much as we know about one of the several aircraft today which were involved in attacks on the United States. Now, Diane Sawyer at Times Square has been trying, I know as best she can, to get some handle on casualties vis-a-vis the people who are pouring into hospitals. Diane?
Right, Peter, here's all I know, and it's kind of postscript to what John Miller was saying earlier. With Beekman Hospital, the closest hospital, as he said, has been relatively out of commission. But St. Vincent's Hospital, which is one of those in the next perimeter, 25 major hospitals in New York, this is one of the next closest, told us just minutes ago they had 184 hospitalized, 2 dead. Now, again, we know that these figures are going to be changing almost minute by minute, so this is very early. But at this time, and by now we're talking just minutes ago, 184 hospitalized, 2 dead. They said to us again, though, remember that where the World Trade Centers used to be, there is now a mountain of rubble. We are talking 200,000 tons of steel, 425,000 cubic yards of concrete, and 43,600 windows with all the glass in them now just lying on the ground. So the excavation has only begun, but 184 right now from St. Vincent's.
Thanks, Diane, very much. And I must tell you, I feel a little embarrassed about trying to focus on casualties in numerical terms, only because it will ultimately give us some sense of the magnitude of this attack on top of the buildings themselves being brought to the ground, and similarly true at the Pentagon. So nobody feels gruesome, or it's not about the gruesomeness of the casualty figures. It is simply trying to get some sense of the magnitude in human terms rather than the physical terms, which so much of us in the country saw just before our eyes. Before I talked to John and to Diane, I was just running there briefly through various different parts of the country where the ripple effect of these attacks were felt. In Las Vegas, for example, this is back to the Associated Press report, which they did a really good job pulling the country together. Security was increased at all of casinos on the Strip in Las Vegas, because if you think about it, for the enemies of the United States, that kind of excess is seen as a symbol of the United States as well. The only place we could find all of the federal buildings open so far was in Vermont, where the federal buildings in Montpelier and Burlington were both open. And, you know, they have an atomic energy plant up there, and it was placed on a state of heightened security as well. Whereas in Nebraska, you'll see the first of probably many examples of this in the hours and days ahead. State employees were asked if they would give blood, because blood will be needed. There is a blood shortage in the United States, as we've heard time and again from the Red Cross. It's almost at a state of crisis in terms of blood collection in the United States at the moment. And so and what do you need in a time like this? You need blood, and you need plasma for all the people who have been hurt and damaged, and so that's important. And in Nebraska, state employees were responding to requests for blood donations, and at the Air Force bases out there, and then the security was heightened. And at churches all over the country, they're beginning to have these services, which will become part of the national fabric in the next couple of days, as people pray for the victims and those we hope are survivors of this. Terry Moran is at the White House, which is his normal beat. He didn't go with the president to Florida today. It's often the case that if the president's doing a purely political trip, we ask him to stay home to give us a broader sense of things. Well, Terry, what's the state of the White House as of now?
Well, Peter, the White House has pretty much been evacuated altogether. Just before it was evacuated, we are told that the national security team was taken to the secure situation room in there, but they are the only people in there. White House staff, most of the White House staff was told to go home. And the president, as you've heard, flew to Louisiana and is now en route, we don't know where. As he said, he is trying to make sure that the country knows that the government is still running. We've seen around town motorcades assembling outside the various cabinet departments, and we've just seen recently some traffic into the White House. So there is some government activity, but without the president at the moment.
Terry, there's a very small collection of reporters and camera team on board. The President and Air Force One at the moment. I think the only reporter on board is Ann Compton, am I correct? Or certainly the only television reporter on board?
Well, actually, Ann is in the radio seat today. The pool, as it's called, is flying with the president. Today, CBS News is the pool. It alternates every day.
Right.
This pool will travel with him wherever he goes, and he made that statement that we saw earlier to the pool. The rest of the press who is accompanying the president to Florida, we are told, is now on a bus because of the air traffic shutdown from Florida back to Washington.
Terry, I wondered if, from your perspective of our White House correspondent, whether you agree with me and certainly our political director, I think, who says that how the president now spends his time today, what he is seen to do, is absolutely vital, not just to the country, but to him.
Well, it's critical time for him. He said that the nation is being tested. The new president is being tested as well. But he has other restrictions on what he can do. That political mission he has to reassure the country and to show that he is leading it is actually secondary or even tertiary. The first thing is he has to keep himself safe. The Secret Service is going to insist that he be secured, and then second, he must remain in efficient strategic communication with United States forces around the world. That's undoubtedly why they took him to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport. But you're absolutely right. The main thing he has to do for most Americans is communicate to them that he's in charge, that he intends to take control of this situation, and as he said, hunt down the people who are responsible for it and punish them.
Terry, I know you want to go back to your reporting. Is there anything else you want to add at the moment?
Well, Peter, it's just that this whole complex, which is usually abuzz with activity, which is really an office for hundreds of people, is now silent for the most part, and an armed camp. And that is a very striking thing for all of us who go to work there every day.
And what I notice is you're to the south of the South Lawn. You're on the southern side of the White House. We very often see you broadcasting from the other side of the White House. Why are you way down where you are?
Well, we've been cleared out of the North Lawn, which is where we normally broadcast from, and we are now, as you can see, south of the south ellipse of the White House. I can tell you that the evacuation of the White House itself, which has happened before with bomb threats and suspicious cars and packages, today did not proceed as orderly as it has. I was told by one of the White House staffers that their security official came in and said everybody should leave in an orderly fashion, and about a minute later an agent ran in and said, just run, get out.
Okay, thanks very much, Terry. We'll come back to you, but you get some sense from Terry Moran standing there, locked dramatically out of the area with which he is so familiar. We saw some pictures earlier today. I'm here we get them up again for people who have just joined us, of people leaving the White House early on. First, the White House police walking out fairly casually, and then as the tension began to build and the awareness of what was going on began to be heightened, people began to run outside of the White House. This is a place supposed to be, you know, quite extraordinarily secure. And he was, I think, more than anything else, this concern that...
I'm Del Walters, live in the ABC 7 newsroom. You're looking at live pictures right now of the Pentagon, and as of 7 minutes ago at 1:37, D.C. Mayor Anthony Williams, actually around 1:30 Eastern Time, declared a state of emergency in the District of Columbia. He indicated that 100 police officers will be manning key intersections and that the National Guard is being mobilized at this point.
We want to bring you up to date right now on what's happening in the nation's capital. Of course, all of this comes after an attack on the Pentagon at about 10 o'clock this morning. We have pictures of that earlier today. The Pentagon evacuated after a plane flew into the heliport entrance of the Pentagon, landing in the central courtyard there. Major damage at the Pentagon. As a result, very quickly, not only the Pentagon was evacuated, but also our U.S. Capitol building, the White House, as you heard Terry Moran saying earlier, all federal buildings, including the State Department, now all monuments and museums have closed. culminating now in the mayor talking about this being a state of emergency here in the nation's capital.
This is the injury update. At this hour, the efforts to fight the fire at the Pentagon continue. The Virginia Hospital Center is reporting that there are 26 people that have been taken there with injuries. No word yet on the severity of the injuries. The Washington Hospital Center says that 7 people have been injured there. They say that most of those who have been brought to the Washington Hospital Center were burned. George Washington Hospital Center says they have 2 patients in the emergency room. Both of them are said not to have life-threatening injuries.
Well, this attack has obviously precipitated a certain level of chaos downtown, as not only federal buildings have closed, but also a lot of private office buildings and schools closing around the area. And so we want to show the mayor earlier when he was speaking about why he thinks Washington should be in a state of emergency. Here's the mayor.
The heinous terrorist acts committed this morning are the acts of cowards. Like all of you, all of us in the district are saddened by the loss of lives these acts have caused. Let us keep all the victims and their families in our thoughts and in our prayers. I'd like to reassure the citizens of the District of Columbia that all of our emergency agencies are fully deployed to meet any emergencies that might arise. I ask your cooperation and full support during this critical period. Our first priority is to be able to respond effectively to the emergency situations as they arise. To that end, and to ensure that we have the highest level of preparedness, I have declared a state of emergency in the District of Columbia so that emergency vehicles can move throughout our neighborhoods and so that in the event of an incident here in the district, we are fully prepared. I'm also communicating regularly with the White House and have the full support of our federal emergency agencies as well as the cooperation of the D.C. National Guard.
We want to bring you up to date on the situation. One of the emergencies here involves the donation of blood. The Red Cross says that the donations and the blood supplies are low. The number you can call if you wish to give blood is there on the screen. It is 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. Again, 1-800-GIVE-LIFE. And also, you're being told not to call 911 in the district. Instead, use the number 311.
The mayor also said stay out of the city if you can. If you have to come to pick up family members or children, do that. But if you are able to, you should stay out of the city.
We'll be back.
We have to be on a war footing. Senator Hagel has said that we've got to start securing our borders, locking down our airports, revisiting the way we protect our public institutions. What about that?
I hope that's not true. I would say it another way. I would say we've come face to face with a new reality. A reality that we knew existed and we knew was possible. A reality that has happened in varying degrees in other countries. But if, in fact, in order to respond to that reality, we have to alter our civil liberties, change the way we function, then we have truly lost the war. The war is one that allows us the way to conduct the war is to demonstrate our institutions are functioning, that your civil liberties, your civil rights, your ability to be free and walk and move around, in fact, are not fundamentally altered. Anybody who's willing to strap dynamite to their body or have a suicide kamikaze mission, you'll never fundamentally be able to stop. It doesn't matter what you do. There are a lot of things we can do, though, to diminish significantly the possibility of this happening again without changing our character as a nation.
Well, it's an amazing scene here, Peter. The skies are clear. There are usually planes in the sky. The skies are clear over the Capitol. The streets are completely empty. There is still smoke rising up from the Pentagon where the plane hit the Pentagon earlier. And as you can see, the members of Congress are all trying to grapple with what to do next. Senator Biden, of course, is going to be receiving all kinds of security briefings.
Linda, I have a question, if I may. For
Yes, Peter, go ahead.
I have a question for the Senator. I apologize via you. The Senator is the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, so he is party to all of the information in the intelligence community. Was the intelligence community so taken up with the idea of chemical and biological warfare against the United States that they didn't pay enough attention to this possibility?
Well, they clearly understood this was a possibility. The problem has been we have been focusing, in my view, I don't want to second-guess anybody here. Look, the prospect of a chemical, biological, pathogen probability is real. Some of us, literally as recently as yesterday, I spoke to the National Press Club and talked about the fact that it's just as easy to fly from National Airport into the White House as it is to, do the same thing in New York. I mean, look, we know all these possibilities exist. And one of the things we have to do is we have to get our priorities straight in terms of what the real threats are that face us, and use the assets we have to begin to deal with those threats. What I don't want everybody to think is this is some worldwide conspiracy where there's tens of thousands of people who are part of this army that attacked us. This is a group of people who are very well organized, obviously are relatively well funded, and we have to figure out how their network has worked, but we have to penetrate it. But it's not, this is not, we can't, Peter, just say we're going to focus only on this kind of incident and not on chemical and not on biological and not on pathogens, not on anthrax. This, in a sense, is the most god-awful wake-up call we've ever had.
Senator, let me
to
ask
how
you
we have to redirect our resources.
Let me ask you one more question, then. I didn't realize you could hear me. At the Pentagon and the State Department, you already hear people doing what they almost always do in an instance like this. This is so sophisticated it must be Osama bin Laden. Maybe so, but is the United States too focused on one man?
The tendency in these circumstances is to be too focused on one man, one idea, one prospect. I think that we should be calm. Those of us who hold high public office, just calm down a little bit, collect our thoughts, collect the information, and in a methodical way analyze what we know happened and what we can derive from that. I think it's much too early for us to make those kinds of judgments. The first thing is what the president is doing. He called for calm, he's getting in the airplane, he's coming back to Washington, D.C., and I applaud him for that. And we should be back up and running as quickly as we can. And I think we should do that. This cannot be dealt with overnight. It's an incredible tragedy. But it's the new threat of the 21st century that we are now facing. And we're going to find a way to deal with it. This nation is too big, too strong, too united, too much a power in terms of our cohesion and our values to let this break us apart. And it won't happen. It won't happen.
Many thanks, Senator. And Linda, do you want to add something? Linda Douglas?
Well, I just want to say that this is the beginning of what will clearly be an enormous, a profound debate here in the Capitol. The dynamics of the debate in this country, as I've discovered in talking to members of Congress, have been fundamentally altered now. And here you're hearing a discussion of whether we should lock down, open up, and how we tackle this, and what our priorities are, and how we protect ourselves. So I've had just astonishing conversations with members of Congress, Peter, and there's a very grave feeling here right now in the Capitol.
Linda, thank you very much, and thank you, Senator Biden, as well. We'll have Linda Douglas available to us all the time, thank goodness, and Senator Biden says one of the most profound things about all this, which we've said several times this morning, which the terrorist wins when he or she manages to alter the behavior of a people, or infringes on the way of life in a country, that the country, a democratic country particularly, alters its way of life, because that's a step up for the terrorist in question, because it raises the whole question of civil liberties and access and freedom of movement. And Pierre Thomas has just come back to join us. You've had this tremendous argument, covers the Justice Department for us. You had this tremendous argument in Washington as to whether or not that street outside Pennsylvania Avenue outside the White House should be open again to vehicular traffic or kept closed. I mean, the terrorist is already winning in that one regard.
Absolutely. Members of Congress and members of the D.C. delegation in particular have been arguing to reopen Pennsylvania Avenue. The Secret Service has been adamant. You cannot reopen it. Oklahoma City showed the nation what can happen with a car bomb. Peter, I just got off the phone with a very senior FBI official, and he talked about the feeling of people being stunned at the FBI. The FBI Director Robert Mueller, the Deputy Director Tom Picard are at the Special Operations Center. They are communicating with the various field offices. And two bits of information. One, they said that there was communication from one of the planes noting that they had been hijacked. And I had a rather interesting conversation about that. He said, the problem is that there's no system in place once the plane notifies that it has been hijacked. No system in place to stop an ongoing attack. He said, think about it. If we had had time to notify the military would have had to make a decision. Do we shoot the plane out of the sky?
Well, both of you have to help me. You and John Miller have to help me on this, because they put this device in cockpits so that notably airlines would know if one of the aircraft had been hijacked. But nobody really, I mean, I'm sure people did think, but not many people thought hijacks were going to lead to using these aircraft as full-scale kamikaze flights. against public buildings and the other. I don't remember either one of you the last, if ever before, there's been the use of a civilian aircraft to attack a public installation in any country in the world. I may be wrong on that.
You know, it's certainly something so rare that I can't conjure one up. Two things come to mind. One, in or about 1980 or 81, a man with a gripe flew a plane in circles around the United Nations building, threatening to crash it into the building if his demands weren't met. And police helicopters went up, police hostage negotiators began to talk with him, and they literally talked him and his plane down in LaGuardia Airport. Two, in 1994 or 5, on the day of the signing of the crime bill, ironically, a man crashed his plane into the White House. And I remember as a police official attending the signing of the crime bill with this plane sticking out of the White House's doorway under a shroud. So you've had those, but certainly nothing approaching this scale, and certainly nothing approaching this scale with passengers involved. I mean, you have the crash of Egypt Air Flight 990, where U.S. officials believe that the co-pilot intentionally crashed into the ocean, but again, not into a target.
On the phone with us at the moment is the former National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration, Sandy Berger, who's now an independent consultant with a company that consults between the U.S. and foreign countries. Mr. Berger, do you hear me?
Yes, I do, Peter.
Hey, Sandy. I have one question for you, because it isn't so long ago that you were in and/or adjacent to the White House. This could have been on the Clinton watch as well as it could have been on the Bush watch. What would be the first thing you would have done?
Well, you know, the first responsibility here, obviously, is to the people who are trapped in these buildings. This is first and foremost an undertaking here of relief and rescue.
But that's not the job of the National Security Advisor.
Well,
what is the National Security Advisor?
This may involve the National Guard. It may involve other elements, and you have to. That obviously has to be our first priority. Second, securing, as clearly the government has done, other facilities that may be targets, and then looking at
Can I just interrupt you again? Is there a book for this? Is there a book of rules, or do you just have to think, oh boy, we better lock down this, we better lock down that?
Well, you know, we have suffered a massive and coordinated attack here, Peter, beyond the scale of anything we have seen before, and be qualitatively different than anything we have seen before. And the United States, we will determine who is responsible for this. The footprint here, so to speak, is large enough that we will know who is responsible, and America will respond. But we need to do it with determination and also with steadiness. We have to determine who is responsible, why this could happen without detection from so many different locations within the United States, and then respond accordingly.
All right, let me ask you this, because you've raised the issue. With all of the resources available to American intelligence agencies, not to mention your cooperation with foreign intelligence agencies, you've just said the footprint is large enough, we're going to find somebody. What on earth do you mean?
Well, we're talking about a number of planes. We've obviously had this operation happen relatively simultaneously. It's a sophisticated operation, and there's no question in my mind that we will determine who is responsible, and we will respond in a substantial and firm way. This has been a brutal attack against the United States.
Mr. Berger, you know better than I do that in the past we sometimes assign blame to people because it's important, but we don't always know who to blame. So can I ask you if you just see any clue this morning, if in your job as National Security Advisor, you see any clue you would have done anything to begin to try to find out who might be responsible for this?
Well, I think it is. We have to be careful here not to jump to firm conclusions. We did that after Oklahoma City. We did that after the World Trade Center bombing. They were both wrong, but there are certain elements here, suicide bombings, which do have the character radical militants from abroad. I think that's certainly where I know the intelligence community is focused intensely.
I have one last question for you, and it's really just a feeling question. You are now an independent consultant helping American businesses do business overseas, or helping other, get through the American bureaucracy. When you talk to your friends and contacts overseas, will they see the United States as weakened by this?
Well, I think it depends very much, Peter, on how we react as a country. We have suffered a grievous attack. But if America here has to respond with steely determination, but also with steadiness, that means, first of all, dealing with the victims, dealing with security, finding out who's responsible, and taking whatever action is necessary and appropriate. It also means continuing to expect and demand the highest level of cooperation from the rest of the world in going after this kind of terrorist threat. This is not just an attack on the United States, it's an attack on the civilized world. And it ought to be seen as an attack on our European friends, on our Middle East friends, and on others. And the response here cannot simply be an American
airstrike
response.
somewhere. In other words, you can't just mount an airstrike against somebody. It won't be satisfying, right? It may be satisfying, won't be satisfactory.
I wouldn't certainly, rule out a military component of this, but you also have to get to the root of this.
Okay, Sandy Berger, thank you very much. Former National Security Advisor in the Clinton administration, one of the most important members of the foreign policy establishment in the Clinton administration, now an independent consultant, as people in government tend to do when they leave government. It's been hard this morning as we continue to look at the smoke and the dust drift up from a crime scene, as John Miller called it, which we cannot feel in any intimate way on television, only through our reporters and through getting closer in and talking to the cops and the firefighters and the survivors. But we will in time get in there. But in the meantime, we've been trying very hard to figure out all of these airplanes. Because we have a couple of we've got 4 significant aircraft today which have been involved in disasters. And we've asked Lynn Scher, one of our reporters, to try to nail down what we know and what we don't know. Lynn, are you there?
I am, Peter. As you point out, it was airplanes that were the weapons of destruction today, not bombs, passenger planes. We actually know very little for sure about what happened, but we do have some details. And bear with me because the information keeps changing. But I want to start with the only one that horribly we actually did see happen. And this, of course, was the plane that crashed into World Trade Center number 2. That, of course, was the South Tower. That's it on the right. Now, and there's the flame from it. What you're seeing is the North Tower. Behind it, there's a second identical tower. As you know, that plane crashed right into it. All morning, we have been told by American Airlines, among others, that flight, that airplane, was actually American Airlines Flight 77 going out of Dulles to Los Angeles. We were told 58 passengers, 4 flight attendants, 2 pilots on that plane. It was hijacked at 9:03. I'm sorry, it was hijacked right after takeoff, crashed into the tower at 9:03 a.m.
Let me stop you right there, Lynn, because I've had different information, so I'm going to rely on you here. You now believe that American Airlines Flight 77, which took off for Dulles on its way to Los Angeles, crashed into the trade towers, not into the Pentagon.
We were told that originally. What I'm about to tell you is that the FBI is now saying that that's the one that went into the Pentagon. The FBI spokesperson is saying that the flight that went into World Trade Center Tower number 2, that South Tower, was in fact United Airlines 175, a Boeing 767 that left Boston for LAX, departed at 7:58 a.m. this morning. 56 passengers, 2 pilots, 7 flight attendants. This is confusing. I apologize. We are getting 2 different answers to our questions. What I can tell you that appears to be accurate is that the plane that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center at 8:45 a.m. was in fact American Airlines Flight 11, American 11, going from Boston to LAX, 7:59 a.m. departure, hijacked right after takeoff, 81 passengers, 9 flight attendants, 2 pilots. We know of one other aircraft involved in today's episode, Peter, United Airlines flight number 93. This was another Boeing 757, left Newark at 8:01 this morning en route to San Francisco. 38 passengers, 2 pilots, 5 flight attendants. It went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, which is near Johnstown, which is just southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I believe we have some video of that crash site right there, and that's where this flight went down. We are waiting for a press conference from the airlines to try to make some of this clear to us, but right now that is all the information we have on those 4 planes.
Can I just absolutely confirm, because it would try to make it even clearer for people, or you did a much better job than I did. This is from the FBI spokesperson you're talking about, right?
What I'm telling you is that the FBI spokesperson has said United Airlines 175 from Boston to LAX is the one that went into the World Trade Tower number 2, the South Tower. The FBI is also telling us that it is American 77 from Dulles to LAX into Los Angeles Airport that went into the Pentagon.
Okay, thanks very much. So what we have now in terms of the trade towers, we have one American Airlines aircraft, one United Airlines aircraft, which hit the 2 trade towers, and we have a second American Airlines aircraft, which goes into the Pentagon, and we have a 3rd aircraft, United Airlines, which we have no idea about, either whether it was on a mission or for what reason it crashing southeast of Pittsburgh today. But 3 major aircraft today carrying considerable numbers of passengers and crew on board are all down, at least three of which appear to have been involved in a coordinated attack on the United States. I should also tell you that abcnews.com plays an important role in our life all the time, but it's very important at a moment like this, and has a good many offerings up at the moment, including a continuous reporting of the work we're doing here on television and they're doing on their own. There's a reader messenger board up there, as always, and that very often provides information. It has a lot of reporting on the status of air travel and the FAA response, most of which I think we've reported here, but if you want to get it locked into your mind, you can go to abcnews.com. And then there is a lot of reporting, as there always is at abcnews.com, about the ramifications of this to individuals, to communities, and to the country as a whole. Tony Cordesman is in Washington at the moment. And Tony, since I talked to you last, I'm not sure how...
We break into Peter Jennings right now as you're looking at a live picture of the Pentagon, which is still burning. And we want to bring you up to date on the local situation here in Washington after this terrorist attack hits our nation's capital. Good afternoon. I'm Kathleen Matthews.
And I'm Maureen Bunyan. And here is what we have, the latest that we have for you. Just a few minutes ago, Mayor Anthony Williams of the district declared that the district is in a state of emergency. He said he did this in order to prepare the city for any possible future terrorist attacks. Let's go to his press conference to hear what he had to say.
We're declaring a state of emergency in order to put everyone on alert, in order to ensure that we have the highest level of preparedness. Obviously, if something were to happen, God forbid, and we pray that it won't, we will be fully prepared to then execute the necessary contingency plans.
Mayor Williams declaring a state of emergency in the city. Also, he told us that 100 police and National Guardsmen have been dispatched for traffic control at major intersections throughout the city. And he said people should stay out of our city. If you don't have to come into Washington, D.C. today, it is not the day to do so.
Now, this attack on the Pentagon obviously comes in a sequence of horrible terrorist attacks. And we want to bring you up to date on the planes that are believed to be involved in both the attacks on the Twin Towers up in New York City and here in Washington at the Pentagon. First of all, the FBI is apparently confirming that it was an American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 7057, en route from Dulles here in the Washington area to Los Angeles. That is the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. However, American Airlines is not confirming the location of where American Airlines Flight 77 is. In addition, we have United Airlines. That's United Airlines Flight 93 and United Airlines Flight 175. 175 was a Boeing 767. That flight was bound from Boston to Los Angeles, carrying 56 passengers, 2 pilots and 7 flight attendants. We cannot tell you from the airlines where that plane has crashed. And there you see Flight 93 United Airlines. That is the plane that crashed southeast of Pittsburgh. It was en route from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. And finally, that other flight, American Airlines Flight 11 you see there, that was a Boeing 767, and that is the plane that was en route from Boston to Los Angeles. Now, American and United are not confirming where these particular planes crashed.
And Kathleen, let's look at what the traffic situation is like around the district at this moment. At this moment, all bridges into the district are closed. You cannot come into the city on one of those bridges, Memorial Bridge, Wilson Bridge, Chain Bridge, of course. All roads are open, however, for people who are trying to leave the city to go home. And D.C. government workers have been sent home. All workers in federal buildings have been sent home, so there is traffic on the streets. Union Station is open, but there are no trains operating between Washington and New York City.
Now, especially since one of those flights did originate here at Dulles Airport, we want to give you a telephone number if you have concerns about knowing somebody who might have been on board that flight or any of the other ones that we just showed you. For passenger information, this is the number you can call. It's 1-800-245-0999. 1-800-245-0999. Call that number only if you believe that you do know somebody who was on board and you need to get that information.
And we'll have more on this very tragic situation for you as the afternoon continues. We now rejoin ABC and Peter Jennings.
You make very good points, and you therefore assume that there is a lot of money involved in an operation like this.
I think that's a dangerous assumption, Peter.
Okay.
We always use these phrases, $100 million or $10 million. What it requires is a lot of political commitment, ideological commitment. It isn't something 3 people can do. It is potentially something that perhaps 30 or 40 can do. It is possible that only one major cell of some terrorist organization is involved. But I think we also have to ask another question now, and that is whether some state that hosted this movement knew about it